The Meaning of Birds, a Bosco Podcast. Birds are the wild creatures we see every day in gardens, fields and cities. Pigeons, starlings, rooks and sparrows are so familiar we often take them for granted. But what do we know about these everyday birds? And how important are they? And what is their value for us? Welcome to the Meaning of Birds podcast, a weekly series in which we shall take a look at the lives and meaning of some common British birds. Season 1 has 6 episodes. Each examines a different species. I am Paul Stevens-Wood, your host for the series. Season 1, Episode 6, The Robin. The robin is Britain's favourite bird. In national surveys in the 1960s, and again in 2015, this confident small bird came out on top. Nearly 250,000 people voted in 2015, and the robin received roughly 3 times more votes than the runner-up, the barn owl. BBC Springwatch presenter David Lindo, who organised the survey, wants the robin to be officially recognised by the government as Britain's national bird. It's a very confident and easily recognised bird, but why is it so popular? To look at it, the robin is very appealing. Its red breast is a splash of colour noticeable in the harsh depths of winter. Its dark black eyes, proportionally larger than our own, seem filled with curiosity. And its round belly makes it look like a ball when it fluffs out its feathers. It's also a bird full of life with quick, purposeful movements. And it's a great singer. As Dr. Fletcher observed in 1889, the robin's confiding trust in man and his readiness to accept his hospitality, his habit of accompanying the residents of the dwelling he frequents in their walks, hopping from bough to bough in the hedgerow and cheering them with his song, all combine to make the robin an especial favourite. It's also the name of some of our favourite characters: the outlaw Robin Hood, the sprite Robin Goodfellow, also known as Puck, and the child Christopher Robin. It's not really known where the name robin comes from. In every other European language it's known as redbreast, though the Swedes call him Tommy Linden and the Norwegians call him Peter Rosmad. In English, robin is a diminutive of the old French name Robert, and has been used since the 1540s, when the name redbreast also began to be widely used. The two names may well have been put together to have an alliterative effect, Robin Redbreast, and the name robin has stuck. The robin was once looked upon as a household fairy, bringing good luck, and this affection may also be reflected in the name. Since late medieval times, robin has replaced the Old English name of ruddock, that dates back 1,000 years, meaning rusty orange. It wasn't until 1952, though, that ornithologists formally accepted the nickname robin. Robins are small members of the thrush family and go by the Latin name of Erytharchus rubecula. British robins are a little different to the European continental form. They have more warmer brown underparts and a more confident nature. Robins have an extensive range in the British Isles, from John O'Groats to Land's End. There are over 6 million breeding pairs, so it's one of our more common birds. Adults are about 14 centimetres long and weigh about 14 grams. They have a catholic diet of worms, seeds, fruits, insects and other invertebrates. In a mild winter, robins start courtship in January, but the breeding season normally begins in March. The birds pair only for the duration of the season. Nests are on or near the ground, in hollows, nooks and crannies. They are famous for nesting in unusual places: old pots and kettles, the pockets of a gardener's coat, a pigeonhole in a desk, the engine of a World War II plane, and the body of a dead cat. The cup nest is made by the female alone of dead leaves and moss with a lining of hair. The males supply the food during the nest building and egg laying. There are between 4 and 6 eggs, one laid every day, mostly early in the morning. There's a limited migration, with a handful heading south to winter on the continent. They join other robins passing through on their way from Scandinavia. It's recently been shown that many migrating robins are faithful to both their summer and winter territories, migrating regularly. As the robin is a feeble flyer, this is a considerable feat. The majority, though, don't go far and keep to their local territories. That the robin has been a favourite in Britain for centuries is seen in the frequent references to it in English poetry, from poets as different as Geoffrey Chaucer, Shakespeare, and John Betjeman. Wordsworth, in typical romantic fashion, waxed lyrical about it. Art thou the bird whom man loves best, the pious bird with the scarlet breast, our little English robin, the bird that comes about our doors when autumn winds are sobbing? Art thou the Peter of Norway boors, their Thomas in Finland, and Russia far inland, the bird whom by some name or other all men who know thee call their brother? The robin and the wren have deep associations with the folklore of the Saxon and Celtic cultures of Britain. The robin is the holly king, the king of the waxing year. He rules from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, and kills off the wren, the oak king, the king of the waning year. At the winter solstice, the wren comes into his own and kills the robin, and so the cycle of life repeats itself with each season. In other pagan myths, the robin is frequently the bringer of fire to man, scorching its breast in the process. In Wales, this legend has earned the robin the name of breast burnt in Welsh. The earliest evidence of the robin in British Christianity comes from the 6th century reference to the Scottish St. Cerf of Culross, who fed a robin that perched on his shoulder while he prayed. It was later killed by some of his followers, but a friend, St. Mungo, the founder of Glasgow Cathedral, brought it back to life. 8 centuries later, the bird's tameness was so well established that Chaucer refers to it as the tame ruddock in his poem The Parliament of Fowls. Early Christian writers proposed that the robin was present at the crucifixion. In some versions, the robin tried to alleviate Jesus' suffering by perching on his shoulder and singing into his ear. In others, it got its red breast by tugging at the thorns in Jesus' crown, or trying to staunch the blood from the spear wound in his side. Another legend says that the robin scorched its breast in the fires of purgatory, as it took drops of water in its beak for the parched lips of the tormented. There are several old rhymes that also suggest divine favour. The robin, redbreast, and the wren are God Almighty's cock and hen. And another, the Lancashire incantation, the robin and the wren are God's cock and hen, the spink and the sparrow are the devil's bow and arrow, the spink being a chaffinch. There's a long tradition of robins in church buildings. During Charles II's reign at the end of the 17th century, a robin regularly entered Canterbury Cathedral, and it was claimed to shame the Puritans with its regular church attendance, while another lived in Bristol Cathedral for 15 years at the start of the 19th century, although this story is suspect, as the proven longevity of robins is only 8 years and 5 months. A more reliable story was broadcast on the BBC and reported in the Times in 1948. A pair of robins nested on the lectern at Ringfield Church in Suffolk. The vicar and congregation chose not to disturb them, and were rewarded by the birds flying in during hymns and perching on the piano while it was being played. The Puritans in the 17th century had their own story about robins in the propaganda war between versions of the faith. When Dr. John Bastwick was sentenced to imprisonment on the Scilly Isles for outspoken criticism of the Church in 1637, it was reported that many thousands of robins, none of which were ever seen in those isles before, welcomed him with their melody, and within a day or two after took flight from thence to no man knows whither. It was taken as a sign that Bastwick would be delivered from captivity, which duly happened, though it was some years later. There is a good explanation for the robin's visitation. We know that sometimes thousands of European migrants would descend on a place, especially in October. One such migration happened then. While robins have divine connections, they also have a strong traditional association with death and dying. This may come from the old Druidic tradition of the robin and wren killing each other in the constantly revolving seasons, but it could also be because grave diggers arouse the robin's interest when they turn up worms, and they were often seen perched on their spades. There's an old tradition that if a robin enters a house at any time of the year except November, then there will be a death in the family. It's not clear why November was an exceptional month, though there was a caveat that death would come even then if a robin tapped at the window. In some places, a robin calling "weep, weep" or tapping at the window of someone who was sick was a harbinger of death. There's a corresponding belief that a member of a church congregation would die if a robin flew into the church and sang there is, of course, contradicted by the robins of Canterbury, Bristol and Ringfield. There is also the legend that after the crucifixion, as Jesus lay unshrouded upon the ground, a robin came and tried to cover the body with leaves. This tradition is extended to the wren too, that if the birds find an unburied body, they will work together to cover it with leaves. This act of kindness is mentioned in the Old English ballad of the Babes in the Wood. And when they were dead, the robin so red brought strawberry leaves and over them spread. There's a folk legend that if a robin dies in your hand, the hand will always shake uncontrollably. C.A. Federer wrote in 1868 in his Notes and Queries, "How badly you write," I said one day to a boy in our parish school. "Your hand shakes so that you can't hold the pen steady. Have you been running hard or anything of that sort?" "No," replied the lad, "it always shakes. I once had a robin die in my hand, and they say that if a robin dies in your hand, it will always shake." Because the robin is held in such high regard in British mythology, there's a strong taboo against harming them. Even when egg collecting was a popular hobby, it was rare for anyone to take robin's eggs. In Somerset, it was believed egg robbers' fingers would develop twisted and bent. William Blake's "A robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage," and the colloquial saying, "Kill a robin or a wren, never prosper boy or man," testify to the deep belief that any harm caused to the robin brought bad luck. Consequently, in Somerset, a man's cattle would give bloody milk if he killed a robin. However, Britons were not always averse to eating robins. There's a 16th century account that writes of its fine flavour, but these references are very rare. The more usual British attitude to the bird was shown during the severe winter of 1947. In Norfolk, country folk were forced to capture small birds for the pot. Any robins accidentally killed were buried with great sorrow. In Europe, though, they have a different view. Two leading French naturalists, Comte de Buffon and Georges Cuvier, described how to capture it, noting that their flesh acquires an excellent fat which renders it a very delicate meat. The German ornithologist Johann Naumann also describes how his countrymen too killed them in large numbers. But they also took advantage of the robin's tameness to trap them in their houses, releasing them in the spring. During the winter, the robins would rid the houses of insect pests. Even now, large numbers of small birds, including robins, are trapped for food in Mediterranean countries. Perhaps the most famous rhyme about robins is the children's verse, "Who killed Cock Robin?" Who killed Cock Robin? I, says the sparrow, with my bow and arrow, I killed Cock Robin. Who saw him die? I, says the fly, with my little eye, I saw him die. It dates to the 1740s, but was adapted over time, with the rhyme most familiar to us coming from around 1770. It's probably a much older tale. In the 19th century, it was a favourite nursery rhyme used in early reading lessons, as it followed a regular and familiar pattern. Some claim that the story is an allegory of real events, but if it ever was, the connection has been long lost. The robin's strongest association is with Christmas. Images of robins have been used by urban artists at Yuletide since the 18th century, but it seems to have really developed with the custom of sending Christmas cards. John Horsley designed a card for sending to friends and family at Christmas in 1843. It caught on. By the 1860s, they were very common. Early cards did not use religious pictures, but emphasized the family joys of Christmas, like eating and dancing. Winter scenes with holly and snow were featured, and soon the robin appeared. The robin's reputation for friendliness had come to represent the sentiments of Christmas. It's now a common feature. It's been suggested that the association comes from the bright red uniform of the Victorian postman, which gave rise to the nickname of robins for them. The association with Christmas could also come from their obvious presence at that time of year. Robins only stop singing during their summer moult, and few other birds, except for the wren, are so vocal in winter. They will even continue to sing during the hours of darkness. They're often mistaken for nightingales. Set in a landscape of cold decay, it prompted Emily Bronte to describe their song as wildly tender. The real nature of the song is anything but tender. One robin will begin its song as an aggressive vocal display against a neighbour, which then triggers others to join in. The bird has been known since ancient times to be an avis solitaria, a lone bird. It's an intensely territorial animal, so to attract a mate it will sing loudly and aggressively display its red chest. Boundary disputes start with males singing to each other, trying to get a higher perch to show off their breasts more effectively. This usually ends the challenge with one robin backing down, but sometimes the disputes end in real violence, causing actual bloodshed. It's estimated that about 10% of robins die in these bloody contests. It's not surprising that a writer for Country Life magazine has called the robin essentially a little brown yob with fabulous PR. So, to us in Britain, the robin is a divine bird touched with the blood of Christ and full of mercy, bringing fire to us and comforting the damned in purgatory. It's the symbol of joy and goodwill at Christmas. Yet it's also the harbinger of death, and will punish those that harm it by deforming their fingers. For people who carefully watch it in the wild, its violence is shocking. The robin, then, our most popular and loved national bird, would seem to have a deep and complex relationship with the people in Britain. It is indeed an intriguing bird. To end this podcast, here's part of a modern poem called Robin in Flight by Paul Adrian. Let's imagine for a second that the robin is not a contained entity moving at speed through space, but that it's a living change, unmaking and remaking itself over and over by sheer unconscious will, and that if we were to slow down the film enough, we would see a flying ball of chaos, flicking particles like Othello counters, air turning to beak in front, just as tail transforms to air behind. A living being flinging its changes at a still universe. You have been listening to a Bosco podcast. Thanks to Lobo Loco for the music and Zeno Canto for the recordings of bird songs. Both are reproduced under a Creative Commons license. You can get in touch by emailing boscopodcasts@gmail.com. I can send you transcripts of the podcasts. If you would like to help me make more programs, you can make a donation through PayPal to boscopodcasts@gmail.com. This is the last episode in Series 1. Thank you for listening.